It started with a slip. Not a big fall, just one of those small, sharp stumbles that old knees don't forgive. Loretta Daniels, 74, was in her kitchen reaching for a jar of sugar when her right foot slid on a wet tile. She caught herself before she hit the floor, but the pain that shot through her lower back felt like fire. She gasped, braced against the counter, and whispered, "Lord, not today." An hour later, when the pain didn't fade, her daughter Tasha drove her to the hospital. Loretta hated hospitals. Too cold, too bright, too full of people who stared at screens instead of faces. At the check-in desk, the nurse smiled politely. "Good morning, Miss Daniels. We're using a new system today. It helps us assess your pain faster." Loretta winced as she sat down. "Long as it helps me get something stronger than aspirin, baby, I don't care what you use." The nurse chuckled and tapped the keyboard. "It's called FacioScan AI. It reads your face to measure pain. Pretty neat, huh?" Tasha frowned. "Reads her face?" "Yes," the nurse said. "It uses a camera to detect micro-expressions. The AI gives us a pain score from 1 to 10. It's way more objective." Loretta looked unimpressed. "Honey, I've been teaching for 40 years. I can tell when somebody's faking it, and it's never been a camera." They wheeled her into an exam room. A small black lens blinked from the corner, quietly humming as it focused on her face. "Please sit still," the nurse said. "The system will take a reading." Loretta tried not to move, but every breath sent a dull ache up her spine. She clenched her jaw, trying not to cry out. The camera beeped. On the monitor, a digital graph appeared, smooth, sterile, unfeeling. Pain score, 210. Tasha's eyes widened. That can't be right. The nurse glanced at the screen. It's showing low distress." "Low distress?" Loretta said through gritted teeth. "Baby, I can't even sit up straight." "I'll note your feedback, but the doctor will see the AI score." When Dr. Bryant walked in, he smiled, all confidence and calm. "Miss Daniels, the system says your pain level is mild, probably just muscle strain." Loretta's eyes narrowed. "You mean that computer thing said it?" He chuckled politely. "It's very accurate, ma'am. It's been trained on millions of faces. Helps us avoid giving unnecessary medication." Tasha crossed her arms. "So now machines decide who gets pain meds?" Dr. Bryant sighed. "It's not like that. The system's objective. It doesn't get emotional or make assumptions." Loretta groaned softly. "Maybe it should, 'cause my back's making all kinds of assumptions right now." He ordered an X-ray, which came back inconclusive. Then he handed her a prescription for mild anti-inflammatories. Loretta stared at the paper. "That's it?" He nodded. "You'll be fine in a few days." Tasha started to protest, but her mother stopped her with a raised hand. "Don't waste your breath, baby. He already made up his mind, or that little camera did it for him." Dr. Bryant smiled stiffly. "If the pain persists, come back." Loretta muttered, "If I can walk, maybe I will." That night she lay awake in her recliner, a heating pad under her back, the pain pulsing deep and mean. She remembered her mother, who used to say, "They never believe our pain the same way." Back then, it was doctors who didn't listen. Now, it was machines. When Tasha came in to check on her, Loretta whispered, "You know what's funny? I've spent my whole life learning to hold in the pain, and now the world punishes me for it." Tasha took her hand. "Mama, this isn't right. That machine doesn't know you." Loretta smiled weakly. "It don't have to know me, baby. Just has to look at me and care a little." The next morning, the hospital called to follow up. A cheerful voice said, "Our records show you're recovering well." Loretta frowned. "And how'd you figure that?" "Our AI pain tracker flagged you as low distress," the woman replied. "We're so glad you're improving." Loretta hung up the phone, shaking her head. "I guess the computer thinks I'm healed," she said. "Maybe it should come help me get out this chair." Later that day, Tasha sat at the kitchen table scrolling through research on the new system. A headline stopped her cold. Facial scan AI, accuracy drops 65% for darker skin tones. Her heart sank. She turned to her mother and said quietly, "Mama, that machine was never meant to see you right." Loretta looked up. Then who was it built for? Tasha didn't answer. Because deep down, she already knew. Loretta Daniels didn't ask for special treatment, just honesty. But the machine that scanned her face didn't see pain. It saw data. And in its coded logic, her calm, her skin tone, her silence all meant the same thing: no suffering detected. Next, Tasha begins to investigate Facioscan's design, uncovering how the system's training data erased entire populations from the definition of pain itself. The next morning, Tasha Daniels sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through medical journals and press releases, trying to understand the machine that had misread her mother's pain. The articles all sounded the same: shiny, confident, full of words that hid their meaning. AI-assisted diagnostics, emotion detection through micro-expression analysis, reducing subjectivity in patient pain reporting. It all sounded good on paper. But to Tasha, who had watched her mother grit her teeth and swallow her pain for decades, it just sounded like one more way to ignore people who didn't fit the program. The company behind the system was called Facioscan Health Tech, a California startup now worth billions. Their slogan was simple: because data doesn't discriminate. The more Tasha read, the more she frowned. Facioscan claimed its cameras could detect tiny facial muscle movements, furrowed brows, clenched jaws, micro-twitches, and convert them into a numeric pain score. That score then guided how doctors prescribed painkillers. In theory, it was meant to stop overprescribing. In practice, it stopped listening. She found a research paper buried deep on page 6 of the search results. It was written by independent scientists, not the company. The first line made her stomach drop. Facioscan's training dataset consisted of 87% lighter-skinned subjects with limited representation of older adults or ethnic minorities. The paper went on. Facial contrast, pigmentation, and cultural expression differences caused the system to underdetect distress in darker faces. Tasha whispered under her breath, "So it wasn't my mama's pain that was invisible, it was her color." She took her notes and drove to the hospital, determined to confront Dr. Bryant. When she walked into his office, he looked up from his tablet. "Miss Daniels, how's your mother?" "Still in pain," she said flatly. "But I guess your camera thinks she's doing great." He sighed. "Tasha, I understand you're upset."
"No, you don't," she cut in. "That machine wasn't trained to recognize people like my mother. You're trusting tech that doesn't even see her right." Dr. Bryan frowned. "Facioscan was FDA cleared. It's science." "It's science for some people," she snapped. "Not all." He leaned back, defensive. "It removes human bias." Tasha pointed at him. "And replaced it with digital bias. You just can't see it because it's written in code." That evening, Tasha sat with her mother, explaining what she'd learned. "So it looks at your face, Mama," she said, "the shape of your mouth, your eyes, even your breathing. Then it decides how much pain you're in." Loretta raised an eyebrow. "Ain't that something? I spent years teaching kids not to judge by appearances, and now we built a machine to do it professionally." Tasha chuckled, but the laugh felt heavy. They trained it using videos of pain expressions, mostly white, mostly young. Loretta sighed. "And I bet none of them were from Southside Atlanta." "Probably not." She leaned back, her voice soft but sharp. "Baby, when you've spent your whole life having to stay calm to get taken seriously, that calm gets read as strength, and strength gets mistaken for comfort." Tasha nodded slowly. "The machine doesn't understand what holding it in looks like." "Or what being ignored feels like," Loretta added. Meanwhile, across town, Dr. Bryant attended a staff meeting where the hospital's administrators praised facial scans' efficiency. ER wait times have dropped by 12%, one executive said, and opioid prescriptions are down 20%. Dr. Bryant hesitated. But what about accuracy? I've had patients whose pain levels don't match the AI. A tech consultant brushed it off. Outliers happen. The system improves over time. He raised an eyebrow. At whose expense? No one answered. That night, Tasha received an anonymous email from a sender named Marcus R. Subject, "You're right, it wasn't designed for her." The message said, "I worked on facial scans training team. We warned management that the dataset lacked diversity. They said it would be fixed in version 2. Version 2 went to market faster instead." Attached was a document labeled Internal Testing Summary. The line that made her freeze read, "Under detection rate for African American female patients age 60 plus, 73%. She closed her laptop slowly, heart pounding. Then she looked over at her mother, asleep on the recliner, face calm but tired.
All at once, she understood. The system hadn't failed by accident. It had failed exactly as designed, by ignoring the people who'd always been asked to endure quietly. Facial scan promised precision, but precision built on exclusion is just prejudice in high definition. In the world of artificial intelligence, bias doesn't scream, it calculates. And sometimes it takes one quiet woman's pain to expose the flaw in the formula. Next, Tasha confronts the hospital board and meets Marcus, the engineer who helped build the system, and the first to admit that technology doesn't just reflect bias, it learns it. The next morning, Tasha walked through the hospital lobby with a folder full of evidence and fire in her chest. She'd called ahead, demanding a meeting with the hospital's clinical technology board. For years, she'd been a nurse who followed orders, but today, she was a daughter on a mission. When she entered the conference room, 5 people sat around a long table, all in suits, all smiling that calm, administrative smile that usually meant nothing's wrong as long as it's profitable. Dr. Bryant was there too, looking uncomfortable, eyes flecking between his notes and the wall. The chairwoman gestured for Tasha to begin. "You all know who my mother is," she started. "Loretta Daniels, 74 years old. She came in last week with back pain so bad she couldn't walk straight. And your machine told her she was fine." She dropped a stack of printed reports on the table. Facial scan gave her a pain score of 2. Turns out that same system has a 73% failure rate for older Black women. You call that progress? The chairwoman cleared her throat. "Ms. Daniels, we understand your frustration, but we have to rely on standardized tools." "Standardized for who?" Tasha snapped. Her voice echoed in the sterile room. She pointed at the documents. "This thing was trained on young, light-skinned faces. So when it looks at someone like my mother, someone darker, older, composed, it thinks she's not hurting. And you know what? You believed it." A murmur ran through the room. Dr. Bryant finally spoke. "Tasha, I followed procedure. The AI's results match the guidelines." "Guidelines written by people who never looked like her," she said. "You trusted a machine more than a woman in pain." At that, the youngest man at the table, a tech liaison, leaned forward. "Facial scan doesn't discriminate," he said. "It's based on mathematical modeling." Tasha glared at him. "So are redlining maps. Math isn't magic when the data's dirty." He shifted uncomfortably. Just then, a voice from the doorway said quietly, "She's right." Everyone turned. Standing there was Marcus Reed, the engineer who'd emailed Tasha the night before. A tall man in his 30s, tired eyes, badge still clipped to his shirt. He held up a USB drive. "This contains the internal test results. We flagged bias in the algorithm 6 months ago, specifically with darker skin tones and elderly faces." The chairwoman frowned.
"Mr. Reed, you're out of line." "No," he interrupted, "you're out of excuses." He placed the drive on the table. "We told corporate to fix it before rollout. They didn't. They said retraining would take too long and cost too much." Tasha looked at him, surprised. "Why are you doing this?" Marcus sighed. "Because my grandmother's face looks just like your mother's. And when I watched those test results come in, I realized the machine was just repeating what the world already believed, that black people feel less pain." The room went silent. Finally, the chairwoman spoke again, her tone clipped. "Mr. Reed, you're violating confidentiality." He smiled bitterly. "You're violating humanity." He turned to Tasha. "Do what you have to do. The truth's on there." Then he walked out, leaving the room heavy with something that felt like both guilt and fear. Tasha gathered the papers and the drive. As she stood, she looked around the table. "You built a system that can scan faces, read heart rates, measure pupil size, but it still can't tell when someone's hurting. That's not innovation. That's indifference." She walked out, her voice trailing behind her. "And don't you dare call it efficient." Later that night, she sat beside her mother's recliner, watching Loretta's chest rise and fall as she slept. The news played softly on the TV. A reporter said, "Facioscan Health Tech declined to comment on allegations of racial bias." Tasha rubbed her temples. "They're going to spin it, Mama. They'll call it a glitch. They always do." Loretta opened one eye and whispered, "Then make glitch sound ugly enough, they'll have to fix it." Tasha smiled. "You always know what to say." Her mother grinned faintly. "Years of being ignored will do that for you." 2 days later, an investigative reporter from the Atlanta Tribune published an article, "Pain Not Detected: How Hospitals Let AI Decide Who Hurts Enough to Treat." It quoted Tasha, Dr. Bryant, and even included a leaked line from the internal memo Marcus had given her. The model underestimates distress in darker complexions due to reduced contrast mapping. Manual override recommended. The article went viral. By evening, #BlackPainMatters was trending nationwide. Loretta watched the coverage with quiet pride. "I told you that pain would count for something eventually," she said. Tasha squeezed her hand. "It's counting now, Mama, loud and clear." When truth meets disbelief, only one of them survives. Loretta Daniels' pain wasn't invisible. It was just inconvenient to measure. But once her daughter held the proof, the system couldn't hide behind objectivity anymore. Because in the end, the only thing more dangerous than bias is pretending you don't see it. Next, Tasha and Marcus take their evidence public, exposing the internal emails that prove Facioscan's creators knew their algorithm couldn't read black pain and launched it anyway. The hospital boardroom had become a battlefield. The day after the Atlanta Tribune article dropped, reporters crowded the front steps, holding microphones instead of picket signs. Camera flashes burst like lightning each time a doctor walked past. Inside, executives huddled around a long oak table, whispering phrases like damage control and PR containment. But outside that door, a different kind of meeting was forming, one full of patients, nurses, and families who'd had enough of being quiet. Among them sat Tasha and Marcus, folders in hand, waiting for their turn to speak. Loretta insisted on coming too, cane in one hand, dignity in the other. "I may be hurting," she told Tasha, "but I'm not helpless." When their names were called, Tasha stood first. "Last week, my mother's pain was measured by a machine that couldn't see her," she said. "This week, you all act like that's just an inconvenience, but for us, it's survival." A board member leaned forward, frowning. "Ms. Daniels, no one here wants to harm patients. We're following protocol." Tasha's voice cut through the room. "You're hiding behind it. Protocol isn't compassion." Marcus stepped up next, laptop open, his fingers shaking just enough to betray the cost of what he was about to do. "I worked on FacioScan," he said. "I know exactly what's in its code and what's missing." He clicked the projector. An email thread appeared on the wall. Bold text glared back at the room. Model performance consistent across 87% of population. Low accuracy for elderly black females persists. Mitigation unnecessary for initial release. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A lawyer at the table tried to interject, but Marcus didn't stop. He scrolled to another message. "We'll issue a software update once the rollout stabilizes. The public won't notice if we keep the messaging positive." Loretta murmured under her breath. The public noticed. Dr. Bryant spoke next, voice heavy with guilt. "I trusted the system," he said. "We all did. But I can't ignore what I've seen. When we let software decide who's hurting, we stop being healers." The board chair tried to regain control. "Dr. Bryant, your statements are deeply concerning." "So is ignoring suffering," he snapped. His voice trembled but didn't break. "I became a doctor to listen, not to let a camera do it for me." That night, footage from the meeting aired on every major network. Hospital under fire for racial bias in Kane AI. Protesters began gathering outside, holding signs that read, "Pain has no color. You can't program empathy. Trust patience, not pixels." Loretta watched from home, her hand pressed against her heart. "You know what's wild, baby?" she told Tasha. "I've spent 70 years being told to calm down, and now calm is what made them ignore me." Tasha smiled sadly. "Well, now the whole world's paying attention." FacioScan's corporate headquarters in California released a statement that evening. "We are committed to improving our technology to ensure fairness and inclusivity. While isolated calibration issues exist, the system remains a vital tool in modern healthcare." Marcus read the statement aloud at a press conference the next morning and laughed bitterly. "They're still calling our pain a calibration issue," he said. "That's like calling a broken heart a rhythm problem." The crowd applauded. A few days later, the Department of Health announced a federal investigation. Civil rights groups filed class action lawsuits against FacioScan and multiple hospitals. For the first time, lawmakers were using words like algorithmic bias and digital discrimination on record. One senator declared, "We have laws against profiling on the street. It's time we had them in the hospital, too." At home, Loretta received a call from a woman in Detroit. "My name's May," the voice said. "I saw you on the news. My mother died last year because her pain wasn't believed. Thank you for making them see us." Loretta's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, honey," she whispered, "I wish it hadn't taken this long." 2 weeks later, the hospital suspended FacioScan indefinitely. A printed notice appeared in every exam room. Pain assessments will now include direct patient interviews. Technology is a tool, not a decision. Loretta read it during her follow-up appointment. She smiled faintly. "Looks like they finally realized a face can't tell the whole story." Tasha grinned. "Especially not yours, Mama." Technology had promised to eliminate human bias. Instead, it mechanized it. And when people finally spoke up, the system that claimed to measure pain felt a kind of pain of its own: accountability. Loretta Daniels didn't set out to make headlines. She just wanted someone to believe her. But belief, once denied, has a way of becoming louder than any machine. Next, Marcus and Tasha traced the roots of FacioScan's funding, discovering that government health agencies had endorsed the flawed system, setting off a nationwide demand for the Patient Reality Act. It started with a file marked confidential, internal use only. Marcus found it on a shared drive 2 days after the investigation began. He copied it to a flash drive, then slid it across the diner table toward Tasha. Everything's in here, he said quietly. Emails, reports, test results, proof they knew. Tasha stared at the small silver drive, the same way her mother once looked at an unopened bill, calm on the outside, dreading what waited inside. They knew what exactly? That facioscan wasn't blind, Marcus said. It just refused to see. That night, sitting at her kitchen table, Tasha plugged the drive into her laptop. The first file was an internal presentation titled Performance Metrics Phase 3 Rollout. She clicked through the slides, her stomach tightening with every word. Underperformance remains significant in darker complexions, age 55 plus, and high contrast lighting conditions. Facial pain markers less detectable in older African American patients. No mitigation required for initial deployment. At the bottom of one slide, someone had typed a single line in bold. Perception of pain does not equal profitability. Tasha whispered, they didn't just overlook us, they budgeted us out. Another document was labeled Government Outreach Federal Pilot Program. It revealed that facioscan had been partially funded by a federal innovation grant, money meant to modernize healthcare equity. In return, the company promised the government bias-free diagnostics. A later memo showed what really happened. Calibration concerns raised by early testers, elderly African American female cohort. Response: focus public messaging on innovation and safety. Defer retraining to version 3.0. Tasha rubbed her temples. They sold the lie with tax dollars. She printed every email, every slide, until her living room looked like an evidence wall. Loretta, wrapped in her robe, shuffled in with a cup of tea. "Goodness, child," she said, "you planning to wallpaper the house with guilt?" Tasha smiled weakly. "Just the truth, Mama." Loretta sipped her tea and looked around. "So that's what they've been hiding all this time." Tasha nodded. They knew this thing couldn't see black pain and launched it anyway. They called it acceptable variance. Her mother raised an eyebrow. Acceptable for who? The next morning, Tasha and Marcus met with a journalist from the Washington Ledger. Her name was Carmen Ortiz, a small woman with a sharp voice and a sharper pen. "You're sure this is real?" Carmen asked, flipping through the pages. Marcus nodded. "I wrote half of it." Carmen leaned back in her chair. "They funded a tool meant to eliminate bias, and it ended up automating it. That's a story with legs." She tapped the papers. "But I need someone to go on record." Tasha hesitated. "If Marcus does, he could lose everything." He shrugged. "Then I guess I'll lose it telling the truth." A week later, the headline hit the front page. Government-funded AI failed to detect black pain, and officials knew. The story quoted internal memos, whistleblower statements, and patient interviews. One section read, "The Daniels case exposes a disturbing pattern. Technology marketed as objective was trained on a world that isn't. The result? Millions of dollars spent to perfect a system that never saw people of color clearly." The fallout was immediate. The health department suspended its partnership with facioscan. Congress announced hearings. And for the first time, patients began demanding to see how their own pain was scored. Loretta watched the coverage from her living room. The camera cut between Marcus testifying before a state panel and footage of her original ER visit. She shook her head slowly. "They finally believe I was hurting, but only after a man in a suit said so." Tasha squeezed her hand. "You started this, Mama." Loretta smiled. "Yeah, but I'd rather have been wrong than right." That evening, Marcus joined them for dinner. He was quiet, tired, but lighter somehow. "I think we're close," he said. "Senators are talking about a new bill, the Patient Reality Act. It'll force every healthcare AI to publish its data sources and bias audits." Loretta looked up from her cornbread. "Good. Maybe next time the machine will see me before it judges me." Marcus smiled. "You're part of that change now, Mrs. Daniels. You gave the system a conscience. She chuckled. Baby, I've been giving people conscience my whole life. It's about time someone used it. Later that night, Tasha added a final document to her binder, the printout of one line from the leaked files. It read simply, "System improvements deferred due to budget constraints." She grabbed a red marker and wrote underneath, "Pain deferred isn't pain erased." The paper trail exposed the truth. Not just a flawed program, but a pattern of permission. Someone always decides what pain is worth measuring. And until people like Loretta demand to be seen, the system will always choose convenience over compassion. Next, lawmakers begin drafting the Patient Reality Act, and Loretta prepares to testify before Congress, not as a victim, but as a teacher, reminding America what it means to listen. By the time the Washington Ledger story spread across the country, the phone at the Daniels household wouldn't stop ringing. Journalists, community leaders, even strangers from other states called just to say, "It happened to us too." A woman from Chicago said her father's cancer pain was rated low by Facioscan, even when he could barely stand. A retired nurse from Houston said her morphine requests were denied because AI readings showed minimal distress. And a man from North Carolina, 68 years old, told Tasha through tears, "They said I was calm, so they thought I was lying." Each voice carried the same quiet ache, the same disbelief that a machine had replaced the act of being believed. Soon, social media filled with stories under the hashtag #BlackPainMatters. People posted photos of loved ones in hospital beds with captions like, "She said it hurt, the system said it didn't." When pain became data, we disappeared. We don't need new machines, we need new eyes. Within a week, the hashtag had millions of shares. Churches held prayer circles. Community groups set up hotlines to help patients request their own medical data. And just like that, Loretta's story became a movement. On a Wednesday morning, Loretta appeared on a talk show via video call. Her voice was calm but resolute. "They used a camera to tell me what my body already knew," she said. "But that camera was blind to people like me. And it ain't just me, it's a whole history of folks told their pain don't matter." The host nodded solemnly. "What would you say to the people who built this system?" Loretta smiled faintly. "I'd say they built it with the wrong mirror. They trained it on faces that never had to hold pain quietly." Her words went viral before the segment even ended. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., lawmakers couldn't ignore it anymore. Senator Hughes introduced a draft proposal called the Patient Reality Act, designed to protect patients from AI-based misdiagnosis. The bill included a line inspired directly by Loretta's interview. "No patient shall be denied care or medication on the basis of automated emotion or pain detection systems without human confirmation." When Tasha saw that line, she whispered, "Mama, that's you right there, written into law." Loretta grinned. "Guess I finally made the syllabus." Hospitals across the country scrambled to distance themselves from Facioscan. Some issued public apologies. Others quietly deleted references to AI-assisted triage from their websites. But a few administrators still defended the system. On a televised debate, one CEO said, "We can't hold technology responsible for society's problems. Bias is everywhere." Marcus appeared on the same segment and replied simply, "That's exactly why you don't automate it." One afternoon, Tasha attended a community forum at the old recreation center downtown. Dozens of older residents gathered to share their stories. Each time someone stood up, they spoke softly, but the weight of their words filled the room. An elderly man with a cane said, "I've been told to tough it out my whole life. Now even computers expect me to." A nurse in her 60s added, "When machines replace listening, it's not progress, it's surrender." Loretta, sitting in the front row, clapped quietly. "Tell it," she said under her breath. After the meeting, a young college student approached Loretta. She was studying biomedical engineering. "Mrs. Daniels," she said shyly, "I'm designing medical software, and I promise next time I'll make sure it can see all of us." Loretta smiled, eyes shining. "Good, make sure it hears us too." By the end of that month, congressional hearings were set. Marcus was subpoenaed to testify as a whistleblower. Loretta received a formal invitation to speak as a patient advocate. When the letter arrived, she sat in silence for a long time. Tasha read it aloud, then looked at her mother. "You sure you want to do this?" Loretta smiled softly. "Baby, I taught kids for 40 years. Standing up and telling the truth, that's just another lesson plan." The day before she left for Washington, a small package arrived on her doorstep. Inside was a handwritten note from a woman in Detroit. "Because of you, my doctor listened when I said I was in pain. For the first time, the system saw me." Tears welled in Loretta's eyes. She whispered, "Now that's the kind of feedback I'll take." It was never just about one woman in one hospital. It was about centuries of disbelief written into modern code. Loretta's pain wasn't rare. It was simply recorded too late. But now, every story like hers had a name, a face, and a voice that refused to be measured by a machine. Next, Loretta testifies before Congress, joining Marcus in pushing for the Patient Reality Act and reminding lawmakers that technology without empathy isn't innovation, it's repetition. The Capitol hearing room was colder than Loretta expected. Marble walls, long tables, bright lights, and faces that looked tired but curious. She sat in the front row beside Marcus, her cane resting quietly against the chair, her nameplate shining beneath the seal of the United States Senate. Above her head, a banner read, "Hearing on the Patient Reality Act, Addressing Bias in Healthcare Technology." The air buzzed with reporters, flashes, and murmurs. Tasha stood near the back, watching her mother adjust her glasses and straighten her notes. When the committee chair, a silver-haired woman from California, tapped her gavel, the room fell silent. "Mrs. Daniels," she said kindly, "you have the floor." Loretta took a slow breath. Her voice, when it came, was steady, low but strong, the kind of voice used to guiding classrooms full of children. "Thank you, Senator. My name is Loretta Daniels, 74 years old, retired school teacher from Georgia. A few months ago, I came to the hospital because I couldn't stand without pain. But the machine they used said I was fine. I told them I wasn't. They told me the computer said I was." The room shifted, quiet but heavy. She looked down at her hands. "They trusted the numbers more than my words. That's not medicine. That's math pretending to be mercy." Murmurs rippled through the room. Loretta looked up again. "I'm not against technology. I've seen what it can do. But I also know this. If a machine can't see me, it shouldn't speak for me." A few people clapped before the chair rapped her gavel softly for order. "Mrs. Daniels," one senator asked, "what would you want us to change?" Loretta smiled faintly. "Simple. Make sure the next version of that machine learns from faces like mine. And make sure the people behind it remember that pain don't need permission to exist." Marcus spoke next, clicking through slides that displayed internal emails and performance charts. He explained how Facioscan had been released despite warnings. He showed data proving that bias wasn't an accident but an ignored expense. At one point, a senator asked, "Mr. Reed, if we can't trust algorithms, what's the solution?" Marcus replied, "We don't need to stop using AI. We need to teach it who we are. And that starts with diverse data, ethical oversight, and transparency." He paused. "Machines learn from the world we build. If our world is biased, our machines will be too." When he finished, Tasha joined them at the witness table as a medical professional. She spoke about how nurses were pressured to follow the AI's pain scores instead of their instincts. The more we trusted the screen, she said, the less we looked at the person. It made caring feel like coding. A senator leaned forward. And what should hospitals do instead? Tasha answered softly. Go back to asking patients what they feel, then believe them. By the end of the hearing, the committee voted unanimously to advance the Patient Reality Act. The bill would require 1. Human oversight. AI cannot determine treatment or medication without human review. 2. Transparency. Companies must disclose the racial and age makeup of their training data. 3. Cultural calibration. All health AI systems must pass independent bias testing before deployment. 4. The Daniels Clause. Patients' self-reported pain must always be recorded as primary evidence. When the hearing adjourned, reporters rushed forward. Mrs. Daniels, how does it feel to make history? One asked. Loretta smiled, shaking her head. I didn't make history, honey. I just made them listen. That night, Tasha and Marcus joined her at a small diner near the Capitol. The table was quiet for a while. Then Marcus said, They're calling it the Daniels Clause, you know. Loretta chuckled. Lord, I didn't even like having a parking space with my name on it. Tasha laughed. Too late now, Mama. You're federal property. They all laughed, and for the first time in months, it felt easy. A week later, the Senate passed the bill with near unanimous support. The president signed it into law under bright white lights. When he handed Loretta the signing pen, she said, Sir, I hope you never need this law, but I'm glad it's here in case you do. He smiled. Mrs. Daniels, you've given pain a voice. She shook her head gently. No, I just reminded it that it had one all along. Back home, the local news showed new signs being installed in hospitals nationwide. Protected by the Daniels Clause, every pain deserves to be believed. Loretta watched from her recliner, smiling. Guess the machine finally learned something, she said. Tasha nodded. Yeah, Mama, it learned your language. Laws don't fix hearts, but sometimes they make it harder to ignore them. The Daniels Clause became more than legislation. It became a lesson. Technology can measure pain, but only people can believe it. Next, Loretta returns home to find her face, the one a machine once misread, now displayed in hospitals across America, reminding every patient and every doctor what empathy truly looks like. A few months after the signing of the Patient Reality Act, Loretta Daniels walked back into the same hospital where it all began. The air smelled of disinfectant and coffee, same as always. But something was different this time. Quieter, softer, almost respectful. On the wall by the check-in desk hung a new framed notice. The letters were big, bold, and proud. This facility operates under the Daniels Clause. Every pain deserves to be believed. Loretta stopped in front of it, her reflection faint in the glass. She smiled. Well, she said to herself, look who finally got their manners. A young nurse noticed her and hurried over. Mrs. Daniels, she asked, her eyes bright, are you the Daniels? Loretta laughed. I don't know about the one, but I'm one of them. The nurse grinned. I've seen your video in orientation. They show your hearing to every new hire now. Oh, Lord, Loretta said, blushing. I hope I wasn't talking too much. Not enough, if you ask me, the nurse said. You reminded us that technology can't do our job for us. Loretta nodded. Machines might measure, honey, but people make meaning. Down the hall in the pain management unit, a new sign glowed above a camera system. Facial Scan 3.0, calibrated for every face. This time, the device came with a human monitor beside it, a nurse who could override the score at any time. Next to the screen, a small plaque read, Inspired by the Daniels Clause, because no machine can define your pain. Loretta paused to read it, her heart swelling with something between pride and disbelief. Guess I got upgraded, she murmured. Later that day, she was invited to speak to a group of medical interns in training. She sat at the front of the classroom, not standing, not preaching, just talking the way she always had. "You'll hear a lot about efficiency," she said, "about how AI helps you do your jobs faster. But listen close. Faster doesn't mean better if it skips the part where you look somebody in the eye." The room was silent. "I'm not anti-technology," she continued. "I'm anti-forgetting. You can build machines to read pain, but you can't build one to care." The students nodded, some taking notes, others just watching her. This small, calm woman who'd done something most of them would spend their careers trying to do, change the system without losing her grace. That night back home, Loretta sat on her porch as the sun dipped low over the trees. Her body still ached some days, but she'd learned not to rush the healing. A cool breeze brushed her cheek. From somewhere down the block, a child laughed. Tasha joined her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. "You know, Mama," she said, "they're calling the Patient Reality Act the biggest healthcare reform in 20 years. Loretta chuckled. "Well, that's fancy talk for we finally did what we should have done all along." They sipped in silence for a moment. Tasha leaned over. "I think Marcus is starting a foundation. Wants to make sure future AIs are built by teams that look like the world, not just part of it." Loretta smiled. "Good. He's got the heart for it." The next week, a hospital in Chicago unveiled a mural titled "The Faces of Pain." It featured portraits of patients from every background, including a smiling Loretta Daniels, eyes full of warmth and defiance. Below her image were words she'd spoken at the hearing. "If a machine can't see me, it shouldn't speak for me." People took photos. Some cried. And somewhere across the country, Loretta's quiet voice, the one the system once dismissed, became the echo behind a national shift in empathy. Months later, Tasha found her mother sitting at her kitchen table again, the same old tin box open in front of her. Inside were insurance cards, printouts, and one neatly folded piece of paper, the official certification of the Daniels Clause. "You keeping that safe, huh?" Tasha teased. Loretta smiled. "It's my proof, maybe. Not that I fought, but that I was seen." She closed the lid gently and patted it. "You'd be surprised how good it feels to exist on paper again." That night, the local news ended with a clip of Loretta's story. The law, the hearings, the smile. And the anchor's voice said, "Her pain changed policy. Her name changed how we measure humanity." Loretta didn't need to hear the rest. She turned off the TV, whispered a prayer of thanks, and smiled into the quiet. "See, Mama," she murmured, thinking of her own mother. "They finally listened." Loretta Daniels never set out to make history. She only wanted to be believed. But belief, once ignored, becomes a revolution. Her story became a promise that no matter your color, your calm, or your code, every pain deserves to be seen. The Daniels Clause, 2038, because every pain deserves to be believed. If this story moved you, share it. Someone you love might be waiting to be seen. Subscribe to Older Black Person Stories When Data Meets Dignity for more true stories about courage, care, and the fight to stay visible in a digital world.